I clear my mind when I pick up the violin and play. Good evening, my dearest Lisa. I want you to know what I know. Today I will talk to you about my intimate relationship with music. I've spent the last several weeks making notes on this subject. I will be reading from these notes. I hope you don't mind. And we are very fortunate this evening to have a live presentation of chamber music on the radio. Where to begin? Did I tell you sometimes I make my own repairs to my violin? I am not a woodworker or a luthier. I am a scientist who usually works with pencil and paper in hand. I have many concepts that swirl around in my head. And these concepts sometimes make it to a notebook or a chalkboard or a single piece of paper, which I can tell you ends up in the trash container very quickly. Now don't worry, I will get back to what I was going to show you. I am what you might call an enthusiastic amateur musician. I've played the violin my entire life. And when joining other musicians, I do enjoy playing chamber music. Chamber music creates an intimate, close relationship between the musicians and their instruments. The character and intent of the composer is clearly evident, although there is still room for interpretation in a small group. Haydn was considered to be the father of the chamber music. He composed 85 compositions for string quartets, 45 compositions for piano trios, and numerous additional chamber combinations. I have played music with accomplished musicians, and unfortunately, due to my worldwide notoriety, those other musicians oftentimes expect me to be flawless. You know the trouble with you, Einstein, is you can't count. That is what Fritz Kreisler once told me. Oh, I can count. Sometimes I count a little bit slower than at other times. Sometimes I'm thinking of scientific equations and problems. But it's okay in the end. The others just encourage me to keep up, Einstein. I call her Lina, my violina. She travels with me on trains and buses, automobiles, and oftentimes on foot. And she does get bounced around a bit. I have even dropped her a number of times over the years. Needless to say, she occasionally needs some attention. A split in the seam may occur, or a peg may break. Those are simple repairs. But to mix an effective adhesive, well, that is the key. It takes a magician to mix a glue that will not only hold the violin together, but will be flexible enough to ride the waves of sound vibration and changes in temperature and humidity. That is a metaphor for humanity. To be together, stick together, and be flexible. A new universal truth, a new equation. Cohesion equals flexibility times vibration. No, that would make cohesion a much too big number. Perhaps flexibility equals cohesion times vibration. Another form of, I inquire too much. Sometimes my inquiries take up all of my time, and when I think of something new, it subjugates all other interests. This is my Achilles heel. I cannot help myself. This is how I think of music. Classical music requires both discernible measures of depth and feeling. Layers of thoughtful construct adds to depth, while the feeling of a piece must be enjoyable but not too personal. Oh, Beethoven, he is too personal. He sometimes makes me feel uncomfortable. But perhaps that is good to be uncomfortable once in a while. But Bach, Schubert, Haydn, and especially Mozart. It is as Mozart made no mistakes in his compositions. There were no erasures in his manuscripts. I seek solace in Mozart. Mozart music is so pure and beautiful. It is a reflection of the inner beauty of the universe itself. Like all great beauty, Mozart music is pure simplicity. But when I am improvising, and it appears it may come of something, I do require the clear constructions of Bach in order to follow through. I was at the age of 6 when my mother bought me my first violin. I fought with all my strength against the rigidity of practice and scales and the confinement of lessons. But once I was introduced to the Mozart sonatas, my life changed forever. Whenever I struggle with the problem of physics or mathematics, or the problems of the world tug at me, I seek solace and I take refuge in music. It never fails to calm my spirit and help me solve very difficult problems. Music is not something I see or hear, but something rather that I feel. It guides my thinking. It is the fluid through which all matter of being flows. Are we members of the audience or simply intricate members of the orchestra? I feel I am the music. It flows through me and I through it simultaneously. Esther, my second wife, and I were driven to the coast by some neighborhood friends of ours to look at a possible summer cottage to escape the crush of constant attention I unfortunately attracted. Esther and her daughter Margaret were in charge. I was along for the ride. Bored was the whole operation. I ended up on the porch of the cottage and smoked my pipe. After several minutes, the 5-year-old son of our friends, he ended up on the porch as well, equally as bored. After a moment, I felt his presence. I felt him staring at me. He stared at me, and so I stared back. And the contest began. This went on for what seemed like an hour. Finally, there was a disturbance in the fabric of the universe. I moved 1 foot forward 3 inches. This distracted him, and I won the contest. And then he reciprocated. He moved his feet forward 3 inches, and I moved back. This went on for just a few minutes. It was like dancing the cha-cha. Well, I stood up, I began to sing, and dance a little soft shoe, and we ended up laughing and carrying on for quite a while. That is a perfect example of the potential of a bored, idle mind. are too personal. To bring up too much. It's too much on a summer day. Quantum theory, quantum mechanics, quantum principle. My work was once considered to be astonishing and revolutionary. And then came along the idea of quantum theory. And by 1925, I was considered to be the leader of the old order, the authority I used to abhor. My good friend, Niels Bohr, my intellectual tennis partner, well, he succumbed to the tug of the mob, rushing toward a quantum explanation of the physical world. They made no claim to describe an observable physical world, but only the probability of a description. And then, Werner Heisenberg laid his big quantum egg, the uncertainty principle. Now Heisenberg and Bohr are considered to be the leaders of the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics. But I had a strategy. I would throw my thought experiments into the fray on occasion. At the survey conferences, I would have a breakfast with my colleagues, and we would be solving the mysteries of the world, when all of a sudden, I would be thinking of something, and I would throw it out on the table. This irritated most at the table, especially Bohr. He fumed about it the rest of the day. I was even told that he could be heard muttering to himself, Einstein, Einstein, Einstein. The 20th century also brought changes to the perception of classical music. Schoenberg created new rules for atonal music. Too many rules. Anton Werner composed a 19-second symphony. Composers skewed time. Stravinsky tampered with... No, Stravinsky destroyed any semblance of a predictable tempo. It seems that the Cubists and Mosaicistes were in total inclusion with the contemporary composers. I attended a performance once of contemporary music at the Westminster Choir College in Princeton. And we sat for a while, and the musicians did their best with the new forms of dissonance and timing. I remember hearing the same sounds when Elsa, my second wife, was trying to repair a thick wool jacket of mine on the sewing machine. After listening to this music for some time and becoming more and more irritated, I quietly pulled my pen out of my pocket and I jotted down a few notes on the program. And I handed it to my companions. I wrote, brutally cruel, just half cultivated. If spring were so, I would wish always for winter. You may call this summer breezes, but it sounds like a thunderstorm to me. The bench we were sitting on trembled as my friends tried to contain their amusements. Let me show you, my dear. This is my Lina, my violina. She has been suffering loveliness. So, this morning, I decided to repair her. So I loosened the base from the body. And we have here the upper bout, the lower bout, the F balls, and this is the fingerboard, the peg box, and the scroll, and the tail pieces here. And then we have the bow, and this is the frog, the stick, the horsehair, and so on. So I take my Lina, and I do my best to repair her. All of this is woven together in a beautiful wood grain. When you hold a violin, it is a delicate business. It is very light in weight, but its structure is strong. It is said that an elephant could stand on a violin in the right place and not break it. Well, perhaps not. I just made that up. To play this instrument, as Newton might say, is to create an energetic impulse, the rubbing of the bow to the string, resulting in an equal but opposite reaction called sound. Add to that the mathematics of written notes, and of course you have music. In mathematics, there is music. In the magnificent splendor of the outdoors, there is music. In the sounds of a bustling city, there is music. There is music in the rustling of fall leaves as they rush toward their exploration of the full spectrum of color. Sound cannot be detected in a vacuum. It requires molecules to oscillate and be carried to the ear on waves of sound. The bow, when touching the string, sticks to the string, pulls the string, and then the tension of the string wins back its position. The bow sticks and slips, sticks and slips. Hundreds of times this tug-of-war occurs on each draw of the bow, and every molecule of this wooden violin sings as a result. Stringed instruments are astonishing amplifiers. This wooden box creates sound that can be heard throughout any music hall. The more the violin maker understands this relationship between the violin and physics, the more pure and beautiful the sound will be. Perhaps physicist Dr. C.V. Raman from India, who wrote a very important paper about the physics of stringed instruments, says it best. I brought a little sample of what he wrote, and I would like to read it to you. Section 11, effect of periodic force applied at a point. It is clear that the motion of a bowed string is in case of maintained vibration, and an adequate treatment of subjects is only possible if the dissipated forces to which the string or subject are taken into account. The dissipation may be due, A, to the direct communication of energy to the surrounding medium from the string, or B, to motion set up in the supports between which the string is stretched. The forced oscillation of a string in the presence of dissipated forces of the first kind is readily found on the assumption that each element of a string is resisted by a force proportional to its velocity. Are you keeping up with me? Ah, good. I think that is enough of that. Music does not influence my scientific work, but both are nourished by the same sort of longing. They complement each other in the release they offer. Each provide a feeling of both solitude and exuberance. They provide a path to discoveries of truth out of the mysteries of the world. When I stumble across a perfect equation or a perfect musical phrase, I am inspired. Once I was invited to perform with an orchestra and choir in Princeton, in the performance of Haydn's The Passion. I knew Haydn's music and agreed to join them under one condition, that there would be no publicity of my participation either before the performance or afterwards. And they agreed. So I agreed to play. That day was very rainy. It rained very hard that evening. And on the way to the venue, I clutched my Lina very close to me as if she was the only violin left in the world. We arrived at the auditorium and I took my place with the orchestra. I sat down and struck up a conversation with one of the musicians. It was very nice and he offered to tune my instrument. I gladly accepted. So, when the orchestra began to play, I took my place and began to play with them. During one part of the performance, however, where I must say, classical music. I love classical music for its beauty and precision. But that evening, I played with more gusto than precision. At one point during the performance, while the orchestra was waiting for the choir, we were to come in several measures. Well, I, without realizing it, came in by myself early. Einstein took off on a cadenza Haydn hadn't even thought of. I looked at the conductor, and he was just as surprised as I was. My secretary, Helen Lucas, who was sitting in the front row, nearly fainted trying to contain her laughter. It was the Greeks who first described music in terms of mathematics. Pythagoras was credited with discovering the diatonic scale. When he divided a string by whole numbers, he found he could create half notes of an octave of music. There was a mathematical basis for these intervals. Music, physics, and mathematics were now joined together. It is difficult for people to accept another's intuition regarding a truth. For much of my life, in almost total isolation, I have pursued a unified field theory in order to describe the whole of physical reality. My colleagues have tried to leave me behind. Quantum mechanics. So, my dear, this is my life. A constant struggle for truth, to simplify the complex. People say I sometimes appear remote, abstract, fogged in with equations. Perhaps they're right. To bring into the realm of human understanding what nature has so beautifully constructed, that's my work. I do not believe in a personal God. Personal God, who one can ask for special favors. But rather I believe in a cosmic religion, amazement for the harmony and nature and the universe. The main source of the problems between the spheres of science and religion are caused by a personal God concept. Perhaps we could have benefited this era from a personal God. When you got here. I attended a performance of the great Jewish violinist Manuel. It was a magnificent performance. And after the performance, I rushed backstage and I told him, now I know there is a God in heaven. Manuel was only 12 years old at the time. If only my work was that easy. I believe the best violins are created in Italy. For beauty and contemplative sound, the Italian instrument is my choice. I discovered the Italian violin when my family moved to Italy when I was a young man to manufacture electric dynamos. Here is a poem that I composed just a few days ago for you. If one loves to play one's fiddle night and day, it's not right to broadcast it, lest the listeners scoff at it. If you scratch with all your might, which is certainly your right, then bring down the window pane so the neighbors don't complain. Elsa, my second wife, had invited our neighborhood friends, the Blackwoods, over for dinner one evening. I don't remember what we had for dinner, but at dessert, everybody was eating dessert, and apparently, without knowing it, I kept fiddling with my pipe. I took it apart, and I cleaned the stem, and then I cleaned the bowl, and then I oiled the bowl, and I put it back together, and then I picked up my wooden matches, and apparently I was twirling them around. When Mrs. Blackwood watched me do this, and she finally said, Dr. Einstein, if you wish to smoke, smoke. Well, I quickly replied, I will not smoke. And this created a very difficult, embarrassing quarrel with Elsa. Elsa says, you smoke too much. I said, I do not. I could quit at any time. She said, no, you couldn't. I said, I will stop smoking until New Year's Day. She said, you can't keep your word. I said, I'll show you. And so, I put down my pipe, and I did not smoke. New Year's Day was several months away. But I was no longer a slave to my pipe. It was a revelation in some ways. I had smoked for many years, all forms of tobacco, pipe, cigarettes. I was never without some device of tobacco smoke delivery. The air in the house cleared, and I found that I had much more time to do my scientific work and play my violin. Well, at daybreak on New Year's Day, I looked at my pipe, and I picked it up, and I looked at it some more, and then I took my tobacco, and I filled the bowl. And then I picked up a match, I struck the match, and I began smoking. And I have not been without it, except to eat and to sleep. But I did keep my word. The last 3 weeks or so here in Princeton have been very dry. very warm, very dry. No rain, very low humidity. My garden is suffering, and even the weatherman has lowered his already low expectation of getting the weather correct. Humidity, or a lack of it, can greatly affect the play of a violin. Several days ago, I noticed that Lina was beginning to suffer. Her beautiful face was separating from the body. So I figured I had to attend to it. In 1901, at the age of 22, I was looking for a place for myself in a teaching position or some kind of employment. A few years prior, I had met another physics student, Willy Friends. We became good friends, we talked about science, and later on, unfortunately, to the objection of my parents, we fell in love. It was at about that time that I finally followed my family to Pavia, Italy. So, these were your mother in Zurich, and I in Pavia began a long distance relationship. There were many letters, many love letters between us. We also shared ideas about physics. I was so happy to have her, my equal, someone who was as strong and independent as myself. Finally, the separation became so unbearable that we decided to meet together in the beautiful mountain town of Lake Como, near the Swiss-Italian border. It was a safe, remote location away from the clutches of my family. By now, she was no longer my Leva, but she was now my Dolly. Dolly and I met in May at the Lake Como train station. We walked around town, looking at the medieval buildings, visiting museums, and sitting at cafes, drinking coffee, and eating sausages. We made plans to hike up to the near mountain pass, but unfortunately, there was still 20 feet of snow in the mountain in May. So instead, we hired a sleigh to take us as far up the mountain as possible. And the warm blanket kept us warm, and the driver sang, and the sleigh bells rang. We talked and laughed, and lulled ourselves into a state of euphoria. When Dolly returned to Zurich the next week, she was pregnant with you. I was excited and apprehensive. My parents, being unsupportive of our relationship, could never know. Pregnancies out of wedlock were not uncommon, but in the Jewish community, they were rare. By November of 1901, my friend Marcel Grossman contacted me to say that I would be hired on as a patent clerk at a patent office in Bern. This was great news, steady work with good pay. It would also allow me time to continue my scientific work. I knew you before you were born. A girl. I even named you Lizelle. I love her so much and I don't even know her yet. That is what I wrote to your mother. I didn't know. She didn't know you were a girl. You were born in Serbia, surrounded by your mother's family in January of 1902. I was ecstatic. After several months, your mother moved back to Zurich without you and waited for me to start my job and for us to be married. But too soon, like the waning of an ancient star, your light was dimmed. Our death is not an end if we can live in our children. For there are us. Our bodies are only wilted leaves on the tree of life. I want to teach you what I know. I want you to know who I am. I want to repair this lost relationship. I will put back together this violin, but before I do, I will rename you Lizelle, and I will replace replace this violin is Israel and was repaired by Albert Einstein. I will talk to you again, ladies and gentlemen. I must go to bed, but I will leave you with one thing. Schopenhauer once wrote about music. The effect of music is so very much more powerful and penetrating than that of the other arts. For these others speak only of the shadow, but music of the essence. Good night, my dear.